Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about the TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Magicians. A lot of interesting things we learned in this episode. We ended up finding out that fairies are actually potentially originally from Earth, at least like before going to Fillory, they were on Earth because the Queen ends up talking about it. But it's basically because magicians were hunting them down to extinction, basically the way Irene's family is treating them, and because of that, they fled to Fillory hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So because I was also thinking that was kind of interesting because like two things kind of came up about this. One, the fact is that Irene doesn't know about Fillory. I'm like, oh right, that's still like a super well kept secret, isn't it? Like only a handful of people actually know about Fillory. I know Todd knows about Fillory. I know Josh, well, Josh understandably so, but it's like, I think, and Henry, I think they're the only ones that really know about Fillory. No one else does, because that's kind of like a well-kept secret amongst the main characters of his existence. Because even to the point, it's like, oh, like films like, oh, they're from Fillory, and like, you know, and it's like, Julia shut that down really quick, because I guess the last thing you want is everyone knowing about Fillory. I mean, to be fair, the Fillory was always a Chatwin's, little secret, so it kind of makes sense why it's kind of kept that, because it's like, well, there's already the problem that Fillory has with humans, well, not human, Earthlings coming to screw things up. It'd be much worse because it'd be a situation of everyone trying to get to Fillory and just kind of pollute the world more than what it is. So it's just kind of, like I said, let it stay kind of the well-kept secret that it is and let that world stay, because it's like, oh yeah, probably the thought is like humans and magicians find out, it's like, oh, we're going to take, I mean, yes, there's no magic, so it's like, there's no benefit of going there. To be fair, it's not like a lot of people could just go there anyway. You need either one of these keys. That's like the only way of bouncing back and forth between that world currently. So there's that. It's something to kind of think about. So I thought that's kind of interesting. But what kind of took me also by surprise is the fact is that they didn't actually know about there being more fairies, but I guess it makes sense too, because all the fairies that are here are fairies that have been in their families for a very long time. Because apparently, like the generations of fairies, because like the oldest one in the group is Dust, is his name. He's like the oldest one, and below him, obviously the generations below him and stuff like that. So, but obviously they wouldn't know about the other fairies because the other fairies went to Fillory, and once again they don't know about Fillory. So it kind of makes sense, because also telling them where Fillory is too, they would probably try and attempt to go there and kill all the fairies and capture them. So nevertheless, the Queen of Fairies admits to kind of like, okay, I'll work with you, because obviously, because Finn kind of brought up a good point. It's like, literally, you've stolen everything from me. Why would I help you? And even the Queen's like, why are you helping us? It's like, obviously, you hate fairies, which like Finn really does. She is not hidden her hate, but she is a lot more sympathetic to the ones that are caught up with Irene's family because they are enslaved. Like, yes, the fairies that ran that are in Fillory are dicks and took so much from her, but it's like, she, in her mind, it's like, you guys, they aren't anything like you because they're more like children, and also kind of being a mother herself, that side of her kind of looks at them very differently. She looks at them as like fragile and scared children. So reluctantly, the Queen helps them out and everything. So, and she ends up talking to her people. It's like, the fact of the matter is, we're going to go out and basically make every human pay. And ultimately they do. But it's kind of interesting too, because we find out that basically the collars that they're wearing, because at first when Edwin chopped the head off, I was like, what the hell is that for? Why would you do? It's like, oh, so that's the only way to kind of take the collar off. And I assumed it's because if you take the collar off, you can, because I guess if the collar is still on the body when it's being ground into dust, it may, well, no, I'm trying to think, no, because Sky was being chopped up. So I guess the point is, if you want to, because I'm sure they're trying to grind up the entire body. So I guess it's like, you need to remove the necklace, because I mean the collar, because if it stays on, well, I mean, obviously you need to place it on someone else, especially since this one's about to get chopped up. So that's the main reason why you want to keep it. So never mind, because just for future fairies that they ended up coming across, they could use those. I assume maybe they have like only a limited number of them. Maybe they actually have more. I mean, it does seem like a family trade secret on how those are made and how they operate. So, especially with no magic existing. But nevertheless, what we end up finding out is that all of these collars work on a deal that Dust made, because him and the other fairies made the deal. Like the deal came from him, because he just wanted to make sure the queen, the current queen of the fairies, her mother, ended up escaping. That's what that was all about. And over all these years, he's kind of thought like, okay, maybe this sacrifice was for nothing. But it's like, no, the fairies kind of lived and thrived in Fillory and everything, so it wasn't all for nothing. And then after, breaking the deal, they proceeded to kill everyone. So first starting off with Edwin, who is, I best know him as, Gerard from, Teen Wolf, so that was cool. And then proceeded to kill everyone else in Tessa's family. Many different things about that. One, we ended up finding out from the Fairy Queen, she was like, we cannot break our bonds. Like, our deals are what we do. It gives us leverage over people. Without it, we're kind of weaker and stuff like that. I was like, okay. And she's like, without, like, now that they've, the deal was broken. It's like now they like no one will trust them. What is it? What was the exact words? It says that it was that their words would mean absolutely nothing. And so I don't know whether that's supposed to be in a metaphorical sense of just like, oh, now that people know that our deals have been broken, that they won't trust it anymore. Because prior we had a rate of like, no, we never break our deals. Yeah, they can be a little manipulative in what they do, but they always keep their word. So there's that. But then I'm kind of taking it more as a literal sense, as like their words aren't as powerful anymore. Like there is magic to their words. And so when they make a deal, like it kind of seals everything up. But maybe that magic isn't as strong because their words mean nothing, because it's like, oh, you can't keep your promises type of situation. So the magic is weaker. So I feel like maybe it's one or the other. Could end up being both. But I'm curious. Like I said, I get the feeling like it's more of a literal sense and a magical sense, that like their words mean nothing now. Maybe it's just they can't even make deals anymore. And also, like, what did that mean like for them? I get, because it seemed like it was more in a literal sense too, because they got powered by the fact that they can leverage. Like they're not very powerful by nature, but it's because they have leverage over people that they can, blackmailing is their specialty, essentially, is what that's kind of, it's like, oh, we have this over you, so you have to do what we say. And so they never really probably have to fight back. Hence probably why they were ended able to take over the kingdom so easily. Not only did the humans did no one in Fillory have magic to fight back, but they were also an unseen force too, so that probably helps things out. You get what I'm trying to say? So it's just fascinating. I mean, the queen is very grateful to Julia, because it's like, why is Julia doing all this? Because for Julia, it's like, I have this power. I want to do something with it. Like she didn't ask for this power, but at very least she can do something with it, do something good, something meaningful. And it's like helping out these fairies is something meaningful. And also, let's not forget that Irene escaped. So this whole situation is not done. She will most likely come after Julia or Finn after this. So I don't know what's going to go on, man. Like I said, she got away. She's literally the only survivor of her family, so that's probably not good. I mean, she could always like sniff or ingest more fairies to kind of boost up her power and just kind of go nuts. Well, those we have to wait and see, but I'm sure when she comes back, she's coming back viciously. Because let's not also forget, too, like, doing what she did for long periods of time, it's actually having an effect on her body to the point she was asking Julia to kind of help her find a cure for it, so. And then the other side of things, they never went into it too much, but basically, Irene was talking to her family about, like, basically they want to take all of their fairies, plus the fairies that Julia potentially could hook them up with, and turn them into the white powder, because it's like, oh yeah, someone called Irina up about more of a supply. Obviously, we know it to be the library. And so the library wants more fairies. Why specifically? And the thing is, like, why can't they do it themselves? I mean, to be fair, they're not in a position to do it. It makes you wonder, could they do it before? Like, has this something been working in the background the entire time? Like, have they been stockpiling fairy dust, like, for hundreds of years? Because at the very least, like I said, with Dust, he's been in that family for like 400 years. So for at least maybe 400 years, have they been collecting this every so often? Is it kind of like a little trade between the library and them? Like they could come and get it before, or maybe do it themselves, but now, or maybe Irene's family had a specific process of making it so that the magic's still maintained even when you ground it down. I don't know. And kind of speaking of the library situation on many different levels, we have the whole situation with Quentin, Alice, and Josh, which is so cool to see Josh. It's like, of course we're going to bring Josh along. So they're the ones kind of handling things, trying to track down the final, not the final key, the sixth key, which is apparently in the throne room in Fillory. So that's pretty interesting. Which obviously it comes out about the whole Alice thing. Obviously Quentin he was like trying the entire episode like, yo, what's up with you? Which Alice is like, what are you talking about? Like, because he's like, you weren't wanting to be a part of the quest from the very beginning. For her, she was so focused on going about things her own way. Obviously, she was dealing more so with the lamprey situation, but at the same time, she kind of throws it in Quentin's face. It's like, oh, the fact of the matter is, you always think that you're the only one that can be depressed and caught up in everything. It's like, I didn't want to be a part of your quest because my dad had just died and everything. Like, would you have done the same thing? It's like, I don't know. I kind of get the feeling Quentin might have, like, even if his dad had died under those circumstances, if it meant getting magic back, then maybe he still would have. I don't know. I can't say. Like, everyone grieves in their own reason. Grieves in their own way. Two, I'm not, like, for one, as the audience, we know that's BS. We know you had to have made a deal with the library. It's like, you're not willing to admit what you did. I mean, she finally does, but after kind of putting up such a, like, fit and fuss, it's like, oh, you let Katie walk away with the fifth key. It's like, would you trust her over me? It's like, yeah, he didn't catch you with people that he knows not to trust, considering everything that they did with Harriet and Victoria. It's like, you're really going to just let that get swept under the rug. And the whole BS that, like, Penny got caught up in with them. But I'm sure the argument could be like, well, that was Penny's own decision, blah, 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 blah. There's that whole thing. But nevertheless, she finally admits it. And he's like, really? You're working with the library? And she's like, well, the library's trying to help us. Which, one, obviously the library's got its own nefarious means. I'm curious to see what goes down, because when it comes out that the library's the one that was buying the ground up fairies from Irene, because Julia knows that side of the story, and it's like, whoa, those are it's like, what's that? It's like, no, those are ground up fairies. It's like, wait, you're growing up fairies and using them for what purpose? And Quentin brings up a good point. It's like, if they wanted to help with the quest, why interfere now? It's like they had plenty of other opportunities to talk to anybody, but they didn't. They waited to Alice because they knew that they could convince Alice because of the state that she's in and everything, Because she's so driven to finish that unified magic theory of hers. Because I guess on some level, it's like, oh, I started that. That's kind of going to be my white whale, essentially. It'll be the greatest thing I've ever done, like what that could mean for the future and everything. But more so, it's just, I think she thinks on some level, if she completes that, maybe it'll bring her closer to who she was as a Niffin, or at the very least make her feel like she's found her purpose, found who she is, because she still doesn't know who she is, because she doesn't feel like Alice Quinn. She's definitely not that Niffin she was, and she's just lost in somewhere in between. So obviously, don't trust the library, but it's like, what are they up to? Like I said, Harriet was looking for a battery. Like I brought up maybe last episode or a few episodes back, I was like, obviously they must be they want to gather up as much magic as possible so they could stockpile it for something. I mean, there was that whole big blank thing that they knew that was coming and they were waiting for it, but I'm like, what are they up to is the question. What are they planning? Are they planning on a huge wipeout of everyone else? Like I said, are they going to try and use magic simply for themselves? Currently, we don't know. We do find out that, Josh smoking his weed. I did like to appreciate them kind of reminding us at the opening, being like, oh yeah, the reason why that is because certain things he concocted make it so that you can see into other worlds, and the fairy realm kind of counts as another world. And so the key is in that realm, but that key is what sustains the fairy realm. So they take the key, the fairy realm falls apart. And the whole point is like, well, at least I guess that would be their home, their everything. And it's like, even though they're trying to take over Fillory, which I guess is now at this point in time with everything being the way it is, isn't possible anymore, especially now that Fillory knows who they are. And now they're also weakened from the fact is that, the bonds were broken. Their promises and deals were broken. So that world is the only world they have left. So I'm curious to see what goes down. They need the sixth key if they want to complete this quest and everything. But what does that mean for the fairies, with that being their only home? That's going to be an interesting thing. I'm curious, what is the sixth key's power specifically? And I guess, obviously, it can sustain an alternate, a dimension. So maybe that's its specific ability, creating mirror dimensions. Maybe it's a thing that creates what you need most. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see to kind of fully understand what the key's ability is. So, which is, hey, the sixth key is there, meaning they are one key away. Another story element is Margot and Elliot trying to stop a war and everything, which even Quentin and Alice are kind of like, but if you realize we're no longer kings and queens, it's like, well, who said so? Literally, Fillory did when you got overthrown by the people. It's like, well, they're just scared and misguided, and they made a stupid mistake, essentially. So, it's kind of interesting, once again, because, even though they are kings and a king and queen themselves, Alice and Quentin, they've never played the big role that Margot and Elliot have. Because it's like, oh, this is our home too, you know? And like we fought tooth and nail to kind of get it to where it is. Yes, it's not in the best shape, but we're not going to let it kind of be succumbed to war. It's like, literally, what the hell is Tick doing? You literally just had the throne for a little while and you're already caught up in a war between Loria and the Mountain People. It's like, what's up with that? So they meet with the Lorien King and the Stone Queen, who are like, no, we're not going to back down. Like, what would be the benefit in that? Obviously, Margot talks to the Stone Queen, and obviously Elliot seduces the Lorien King. So that was kind of interesting. Whereas Margot kind of goes a little more threatening. It's basically like, hey, if we don't get magic to a certain point, hey, you can come invade and kill me personally. So, which the fact is, that's kind of thrown out there kind of makes me feel like when it's all said and done, things aren't going to go the way they think it is. Like with the 7 keys, like they'll probably think a magic will come back immediately. But who's to say that there isn't more like some stipulation to this whole situation? I'm just, because this show's kind of filled with a whole bunch of fuck yous, you know? So especially magic in the show kind of becomes like that. So I'm just waiting for the big fuck you that the show is going to bring to them, even when they unite all 7 keys. But we'll have to see. It did buy Margot and Elliot some time, and it did give them some allies in this whole situation. So now they just have to reclaim their thrones and everything. Because they also brought it up too, because if I guess this motivates them to kind of participate in the quest even more so themselves now too. This kind of pulled them away from it. This is going to pull them even further towards it, because it's like, with this, like, once they bring magic back to the people will kind of forget everything else and be so focused on the fact that, oh, we have magic now, so everything's kind of good again. And they'll be kind of begging, especially with them with magic under their fingertips, you know, Elliot and Margot, then be like, oh, they're going to be begging for us to take our throne back. We'll see. But I'm also curious what that means for Margot and Elliot when it comes to the fairies. Like, considering everything that's happened between them, will they be as inclined to, you know, will they be like, oh no, fuck the fairies, take the key, like destroy their home. They try to wreck ours, we can destroy theirs. Obviously, Julia would be the biggest, like, opponent to that situation. Finn could go either way. Obviously, she's okay with these fairies, but at the same time, it's like, nah, she doesn't like the fairies and Fillory. So there's that angle. I don't know. I'm very interested to see where that all goes. And then finally, we had everything in the underworld with Penny. Sylvia talks to him. And we do find out more. I figured as much. It had to have something to do with her whole situation. But Sylvia was kind of for it. Like, she ends up finding out basically because no magic, her entire family got whacked. Which is so interesting, because I thought that was going to play a bigger role, especially like the whole situation about her dad kind of being in kind of a witness protection type of thing. Thought it was going to play a bigger role than it did, but it didn't. But nevertheless, it's like, oh, it still kind of plays a story relevance because her entire family got whacked. Her dad, being influential like he is, moved to the front of the line essentially of his entire family, and they moved on to whatever lies beyond this. They're not in hell. They're not in the underworld anymore, because underworld is more like a waiting ground. So they've kind of moved on. She's kind of left behind. Basically selling Penny out like she did, knocked off like 1,000,000 years off her sentence, which is a lot, but doesn't mean jack squat when you got like, what, 999 billion plus years left anyway. So it's like, what's 1,000,000? But I guess at the same time, that's still something. So then there's the whole metro system of like, that room called Secrets to the Grave, which I would have been interested seeing the, what is essentially the train that's associated with it, that basically Sylvia described it as like it's basically like a long pig-like thing. It's like, of course you wouldn't actually get to see it, but that's so weird and interesting. I wonder, is it like a pig on the inside too, where you'd be setting and sitting on its guts or something? Nevertheless, basically it's like when you're about to move on, you have to kind of pour out your, like, kind of like, it's like, to kind of, before you move on, you basically dump all your baggage, and people come out like an emotional wreck. Basically, they record your last, almost like your last will and testament type of thing, everything that you're kind of holding on to, kind of purging yourself before you move on to whatever's next. And Penny ends up convincing the dude, like, to give him his Metro card, so. And then lo and behold, who does he meet? I was like, oh man, this is somebody from the library. It's like, no. It's freaking Hades himself, which is interesting considering we've met her lady underground. But like, once again, I always feel like I'm forgetting her name. I think it's Persephone, but I feel like I'm wrong. I'm not that well versed in my Greek mythology. But Hades shows up, and he's talking about the fact that Penny has a greater destiny, which I'm like, what the hell does that mean? I don't No, he knows all about the quest, but he brings up something interesting. He's like, "Oh yeah, like the fact of the matter is, magic's going to come back eventually. I mean, granted, you might not be alive. It might be to the point where humanity's literally on the edge of extinction. Then magic will come back, but still, it will come back because it's meant to be something that gods use to kind of always keep humans in check. It's like, oh, you want to act up, you want to kill our children? Okay, no magic for you. Timeout. Oh, it's been like 5,000 years." Okay, maybe. Okay, now we'll give you your magic back. Now you better act right, or we're going to take it away from you again. Like because for them, it's like their children are children, whereas humans are more like their children's play toys. And so you're taking toys away from the quote unquote toys, and the humans being, well, people are the quote unquote toys in this scenario, and the gods themselves are the children playing with the toys. Nevertheless, you get what I'm trying to say. He's basically. Penny ended up giving his Metro card to Sylvia, which is like, oh, that's super sweet. Because for him, it's like, yes, she kind of screwed him over, but at the same time, he's like, well, this all happened because he left her behind. Granted, she was like, she's the one that told him to do it, but ultimately, it's like, he feels responsible. And there's actually something Hades actually said was kind of interesting. Now, the reason why Penny sacrifices himself as much as he does is because he wants people to, kind of notice him, essentially, to basically make them realize how important he is. It's kind of why he's always willing to sacrifice himself. He even brought up like some Savannah trip that Penny took with his mom, which is something that's never really come up a lot. His family life. Once again, Penny still ends up being a character we know next to nothing about. So at least I feel like that. I don't feel like we really know Penny. So this is kind of like first thing of being like, oh yeah, here's a little bit more about Penny, which is kind of interesting. So he left. He's willing to stay in the library. It's like, oh, you have access to all this information. So maybe it's something, he could use the library to his advantage to helping his friends finish their quest. Maybe there is a bigger role. Because the way he was talking, I was like, is Hades trying to welcome Penny into the world of gods or something like that? It's like, no, apparently not. Which begs a question like, what kind of god level is Hades and Persephone? Like, will they be on the same level as Ember and Umber? Or are they like on the same level of Ember and Umber's parents? Like, which... kind of that old gods versus new gods type of situation. Where would they fall in this whole situation? I don't know. It's just, I don't think they've ever really expressly kind of divided them up like that. I kind of would assume that they're new gods, considering the fact is that, I would assume, Zeus would kind of fall in that category since like, well, no, because Hades is, Zeus's brother. So no. Well, I don't know. Cause that all comes from, God, what's the, oh, it's going to bother the crap out of me. The one that the gods like Zeus originally came from, their father who would eat them. I forgot. I'm blanking. Like I said, my Greek mythology is rusty and in some cases downright terrible. Nevertheless, I'm just curious what that all means. Obviously he's joining up in Howard's book club, which I love that first conversation. He's like, come on, Howard. It's like, he's like, oh, I want you to join my book club. It's like, oh, why? It's like, oh, I'm walking around with this, I was like, oh, because I'm brown and I'm walking around with this, like, chained up and everything. He's like, this doesn't look right, Howard. He's like, no, don't worry. We invite everyone of every race and color to the book club. It's like, that doesn't make it better, Howard. Also, where the hell do I know that actor from? I feel like I've seen him in something recently and I can't place it. The actor who plays Howard, he just seems so familiar. I don't know why. But, yeah, like overall, top to bottom, a crazy episode. I'm so interested to see where all of this takes us in the next episode. Especially in Penny's side of things, because I don't know what route that, cause I feel like there's definitely gotta be more to that book club, especially because Hades was like, yeah, go to that book club. That's why I was kind of thinking like, especially when Penny ate the, cupcake, I was like, is he gonna see something special? Is it gonna be like, oh, this is something that we're hiding from the librarians or what? But nothing, at least for now, so we'll wait and see. Because you would think, because it's turned into a situation of like, oh, Penny, you got a greater destiny out here in this world if you just stay here, or you could go back to your old life. But it's like, there's Katie and everything, so that might be the deciding factor in all of this. Like, whether he decides to continue this or going back, maybe staying here is a better option, or maybe he'll ultimately decide to go back with Katie. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, love life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.